434. What we're doing today is we are going to do an add to our excuse me, our comparable sales list, comparable sold properties list for the Birmingham, Alabama market. Now, just so everyone's familiar, right? Just to reset, the BRRRR strategy stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. And the whole point of the strategy and the benefit of it is that you get to essentially rinse and repeat the same pile of cash that you use for your first property to take that back out after you refinance it and use it for a new property. So what does that mean? Let's use an example. If you are able to buy a property for $40,000 and you can spend $30,000 on a rehab to make the property worth $100,000, you can now go get what is typically called a debt service coverage ratio loan. That's an asset-based loan. Again, this is not investment advice, not mortgage advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. I'm just showing you all the work I do every single day. And when you get that debt service coverage ratio loan for 70% of the home value, if it's worth $100,000, you can get back out the original 70 grand that you invested in all cash. And now you get to do the same thing over again with the same $70,000 you put in. So that's way more advantageous, right? If you think about it, what do people typically do? They might buy a property. They will save up for the 20% down payment, use that 20% to buy a new property. And then once they buy that property, they hope it makes money. And then eventually at some point, they save up enough money from their full-time jobs to buy another property for 20% down. Wow. Okay. Well, that could be a really slow process, right? So that's why this BRRRR strategy is so popular, because you're able to rinse and repeat and recycle the same pile of cash over and over again to help you scale your portfolio. Okay. So what is that strategy dependent on? Getting your after repair value correct, right? Because if it's not going to be worth 100 grand, you might have thought you were going to get all $70,000 back out, but in reality, you don't get to do that because you had to leave money in because you didn't get the appraised price that you wanted. So what I do is, for the past year, I've been looking at properties that have been sold for the past 12 months by zip code, address length, bed bath count, square footage, price per square foot. Do they have a garage? Do they have a basement? Do they have HOA? What neighborhood are they in? And then some general idea about the condition of their home. Now that I've exhausted that list, now what I'm doing is I'm keeping track of what our properties coming onto the market listed for on a dollar per square foot perspective. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, well, guess what? Interest rates are fluctuating every single day. And when you see that the 10-year treasury yield, the futures, let me put 10-year treasury yield. Interest rates does this thing where, like the Housing Wire podcast talks about, it's a slow dance, right? It's usually driven by one, a spread between the 10-year treasury bond yield, or the interest rate that the federal government pays to borrow money from investors, and the 30-year mortgage interest rate. So usually it's between 1.5 to 2.5, or maybe as high as 3% in the last couple of years. So as that spread narrows or widens, your interest rates can go down or higher. As your interest rate for the 10-year yield goes up and down, your 30-year mortgage interest rates will also follow the same path. But if you can notice, in the last year, we've gone from as low as 3.6-ish to about 4.7. It might have even tried to touch 5 on an intraday high at some point. But that's what's driving interest rates. And as interest rates go up, your affordability goes down, and then your willingness to pay for that property goes down. So as you see these interest rates fluctuate up and down, now you can see that properties are coming onto the market at different prices. And obviously, if you look at the most recent sold comparable properties, that's what's going to be used as a higher proof or a stronger proof for an appraiser to determine the price of your property when you pursue the BRRRR strategy. And that's why it's so important for us to understand what our property is coming on the market, especially on a dollar per square foot perspective. So what I'm filtered on is I'm simply looking at 4-bedroom plus, because I only want to convert 2 or 3 bedroom homes that are large enough to convert to a 4 or 5 bedroom so I can get the additional rent. I'm looking at single family homes, and I'm looking at properties that have been on the market for less than 3 days. Okay. So now that I got this property that I found, just coming up on the list right here, it was right around here. Great. So this is 1509 Minnesota Avenue, Bessemer, Alabama, 35020. Now, to add this to my list, 42. This property is 2254 square feet, 2254. Dollar per square foot is going to equals to 159,900. It's being listed for 159,000. So my dollar per square foot is going to be 159 divided by 2254. That's $71 a square foot. This is built in 1920. This is listed 2 days ago, so it's 12/5/24. This is 0.38 acres for the lot size. There's no garage, from what I remember, is there? Yeah, no garage. No garage, no basement, no HOA. And then what neighborhood is it in? So I like to just look at the map and I'll just scroll out and whatever this is furthest from the Wheeling Crossroad, but it's close to Bessemer, so I'm just gonna write in Bessemer. So now I know next time I get a property in this area and the zip code, I can now quickly look at, okay, what properties have been coming onto the market, what properties have been sold in this area. So I can use that dollar per square foot perspective to understand what can my property possibly be worth if I renovate my home to be of a similar condition. Now, obviously, comping properties it's an art, it's not a science, right? As you go across big borders, such as these main streets, 150, if you go across highways, such as I-20, you go across natural borders, such as this creek right here, or mountains, you're in completely different neighborhoods, right? So the further you get away from a property, right? A good property might have been this property across the street that you're trying to buy, and you can use this for a comp. But the lot size is a lot smaller, right? So these are all the subjective decisions that you have to be comfortable with. Because when the time comes and you don't get the appraised value that you were looking for, what are you going to do? You're probably going to challenge the appraisal. But when you challenge the appraisal, you have to give supporting evidence that helps the appraiser understand where's your opinion coming from? You're not the licensed appraiser. What evidence are you putting forth that can justify the value that you're getting for the property? Right? That's the important part. Okay. So for this property, let's write some general conditions of the home. Good flooring, good painting. Overall, not much rehab. Bathrooms are dated. One bathroom is dated. One bathroom dated. Kitchen, flooring, and paint jobs all look middle of the road, but no rehab needed other than modernizing the one bathroom. So that's just my general idea. But hey, this home looks pretty good. There's no carpet or anything like that, so I don't need to worry about anything except maybe make one bathroom look a little bit more modern. But that's pretty much it. Okay, so now I know in general what is this condition of this home without going too deep into the link, and what if the link also breaks right at some point. Sometimes the photos get taken down after a while. Okay, all right. So now that is going to be my comparable sold property list going forward. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze this deal so that you guys can understand how to look at this deal, assuming it was just purchased on the market, right? So $159,000 from a rehab calculator. I'm going to come to our rehab calculator right here. I am going to replace the higher pressure flush toilets with two high pressure flush toilets. I'm going to actually one high pressure flush toilet, and I'm going to renovate the entire bathroom for $8,000. That's $8,000. I don't need to do anything for the kitchen. Maybe I want to repaint the cabinets here. Repaint only for the cabinets. I don't need to do any flooring work. I'm going to assume that I only need to do some touch-up paint for about 500 square feet on the home, $3 a square foot. Pretty straightforward. I got $500 for some landscaping. I got $1,500 for the roof in case there's some patching that's needed. So that gives me a total rehab of about 18 grand. Okay, great. That's probably driven by my cabinets and my bathroom renovation. Now, what can I get for rents in this area? If I go to affordablehousing.com and I go to the owner section, I go to the market rent estimator, I plug in the address, I plug in the bedroom count. I can see right here that the average rent for 24 units within a 3.01 mile radius is $1,523. Now that seems a little high, to be honest with you. I've only seen rents go as high as 1,400 in this area, so I'm gonna use 1,400. But I'll do the math of 1,500 so you guys can see what the difference is, right? Now, you might get better, accurate estimates from a property manager that's local to the area, but I've talked to plenty of folks, and 1,400 is really, really top rents for a four-bedroom home in this area. This might be a bigger home, but sometimes you might not get that premium necessarily. Okay. Now, for my property taxes, I'm gonna go down here. I'm gonna take this number right here from the property tax calculator. Obviously, you should double check and make sure that it's accurate and within what you see with the county assessor records. I'm gonna do 50 times 1.2 because I know $50 seems a little low, to be honest. I have another property in Fairfield, and that seems a little. Okay, so then my insurance is gonna be 123. I'm gonna multiply that by 1.2. So I'm adding a 20% premium there for the property. I got 10% for my maintenance. I got 10% for my property management. I got 5% for my vacancy. The 10% maintenance is important, right? You got to make sure you're setting aside enough capital for you to maintain your property. You know that roof is going to replace at some point. That might be a $10,000, $15,000 bill. If you didn't set aside 140 bucks for 100 months and then you get a $14,000 bill in 100 months from now, well, you would have been overestimating your profitability by 140 bucks every single month because you underestimated your expenses. That's not realistic. Don't be that person that didn't put renovations or big capital expenditures in as part of your underwriting because that money doesn't belong to you. Okay. Now, for my down payment in F19, I have 25% down payment here. In E19, I have $39,750. That equals to my B4, my asking price, times my down payment percentage in F19. So that equals to $39,750. Okay. I have 2.5% for closing costs. I got $18,000 for my renovations. So for my finance amount, it's going to equals to my B4, my asking price, minus my down payment percentage in E19. So I'll be financing roughly around 119 grand. I'll put 7.25% right now. Whoops. 7.25 for interest rate, assuming it starts December 1st. So this property, if I rent it out as 1,400, right? I will be cash flowing $29 a month at the 0.6% return, assuming I bought this product for $159,000. And that's assuming my rehab is 18,500 with a 25% down and a 7.25% interest rate. All right, I'm gonna do a couple things. First is I'm gonna update the scenario so say, hey, let's say my target return is 10%, and I'm not saying 10% is a magic number, just simply a benchmark number that I want to use for me to determine whether or not this property is worth my time, right? Is it worth my time for me to send someone out to the property to take photos, take pictures of the property, or send a contractor out there to give me a bid for the job? All right. So now, if I lower my purchase price to $100,000, it's not 8.6, 95. Okay, 92. So at $93,000, that's what I would be willing to pay to achieve a 10% return. That's assuming everything else stays constant. I can rent out for 1,400 and I can cash flow 367 in this scenario, but I have to buy it for 93 grand. Now, does that mean that person's gonna accept your offer for 93 grand? Maybe, maybe not, but at least you know what your number looks like and you can take some emotions out of the deal. Now, let's say your rent really went as high as 1,500 bucks from what we saw earlier. At 1,500 bucks, your willingness now to pay goes higher. Now you might be at, oops, 103. So now you might be willing to pay 103, almost $10,000 more because your rent went up by 1,500 bucks. So if you get more information, right, at some point and realize, hey, assuming everything else stays constant, my rehab is still 18.5, my down payment is 25%, my interest rate is still at 7.25, I'm now willing to pay 103, right? You might get that from a property manager that is local to the area that can give you that confidence. Every market is different. So try to get as much information as possible. Now, let's say your rent's 1,500 bucks, but now your interest rate dropped down to 6%. See how what happened to the cash and cash return number? went to 11.6. So now all of a sudden, because interest rates dropped by 1.125%, you can now afford to pay 112, assuming you rent out for $1,500, right? And now you're cash flowing $414 a month. That's a 10% return roughly. And that's 10.1. And that's assuming you can buy this bar for 112. So because the interest rate dropped 1.25%, you now are willing to pay $9,000 more than the previous scenario. Now, let's say all of a sudden everything else stays constant, right? But now your rehab doubled, right? You went in there and even though the pictures look great, you realize the HVAC needs to get replaced, all this gut work that needs to take place behind the walls or plumbing or electrical that needs to get replaced. Now you doubled your rehab to $37,000. Look what happens to your cash on cash return. This no longer meets your 10% return, right? So now you might have to go, okay, well, if I go to $100,000, 98,000, 90,000, there you go. Because my rehab doubled, right? So I might have made an offer for 112, assuming interest rate was 6%, with a 25% down. But because my rehab doubled to $37,000 now, I'm now only willing to pay $90,000. So it dropped $22,000 from my prior scenario just to get me back to the same 10% return that I'm looking for so I can cash flow $513 a month. And this is assuming I can get above market rent for $1,500. All of these scenarios, right? These last four scenarios, they all work, right? They all achieve the same target return. But it all has different inputs. And that's the exercise that I really would love for you to go through yourself so you can understand. How do I take emotions out of the deal? How do I decide whether or not this deal is worth my time? Meaning, I want to send out contractors out there. And does it meet my return? Because some people might not even care about cash and cash return. If they're buying $1 million property, and I know some folks in Southern California might buy $1 million properties just to try to cash flow break even. They're like, who cares if I make $300 a month? If I'm making $50,000 in appreciation every single year, because that's how they build wealth. That's very risky, right? It's very speculative to bet on appreciation. But that's the strategy. And that's why you got to talk to your own investment professionals. You got to understand why your strategy is what it is and what is your execution risk, right? Do you think that your contractor is going to show up on time and do what he or she said they're going to do? That's execution risk. What are the chances of your Section 8 inspection getting delayed? Execution risk. What are the chances of your tenant trashing your home after just 2 months in? Execution risk. So there's all these different factors that really play into your holding costs and your numbers ultimately. So that's why you got to go through all this exercise. And I hope this was helpful, everybody. My hope is that you copy my homework today. Look at the same deal I looked at today, right? 1509 Minnesota Ave. You can find it. Using the same spreadsheet. If you go to affordablehousing.io, go to the Get Deal Analysis tool, plug in your name, email, your phone number. That's the fastest for you to copy the spreadsheet. I didn't make the spreadsheet from scratch. I got it from a few other folks. I modified it, tweaked it so that I can analyze deals as fast as possible. That's how you avoid burnout, right? All right, and that's it. I hope you start your own YouTube channel. I hope you put it on your own YouTube channel because at some point someone's going to ask you, "Hey, why do you think this is the deal?" And you can say, "Hey, I know this is the deal because I've been looking at properties for the last 434 days." Your goal is not to get millions and millions of views. Your goal is to put in the reps, put in the practice because at some point you're going to be pulling the trigger for your own deals and you might have some doubt, but you're going to go through your own YouTube channel and say, hey, I probably know what I'm doing because I've been looking at deals for the past 434 days. Might that give you some confidence? I certainly hope so. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Saturday. I hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today because that's what life is all about. I will see you all